The flyer was still in his hand when Steve Rogers realized he had no idea how he'd ended up agreeing to this. A senior citizens ballroom dance class. Sam had thrust the paper into his grip with that signature grin of his, the one that spelled trouble. "You promised to try something new," he'd said, "or do you only keep promises made on battlefields?" It was meant to be a joke, but that promise, to live, to connect, to move forward, still rang in his ears like the aftermath of a bell. Bucky had asked it of him, not in so many words, but in that quiet look he gave Steve before disappearing to find peace in Wakanda. "Live a little, punk," he'd said, and so Steve showed up. The dance studio was nestled in an old brick building that had once been a textile factory. Now it smelled of lavender and wood polish, the kind of place where time didn't just pass, it settled. The walls were adorned with fading photographs, black and white stills of waltzing couples, disco dancers frozen mid-spin, and a young woman in midair, poised in a balletic leap. "Captain America!" a voice croaked from behind him, skeptical and amused. "Well, isn't that something?" He turned. The woman was maybe in her 80s, short and wiry, with a cane that looked more like a prop than a necessity. Her hair was an artful nest of silver curls, and her lipstick was bold enough to scare off timid men. "I go by Steve," he said, extending a hand. She looked at it like it owed her money. "Martha," she replied, "and unless you dance like you fight, you're in for a rough ride." He didn't. Steve's movements were rigid, almost comically precise. He tried to mimic the steps the instructor demonstrated, but the music seemed to move one way while his feet stubbornly pursued another. Twirls turned into tangled limbs, and every attempted dip ended in a hesitant wobble. The others, half his height, double his age, glided past him with effortless grace. They chuckled softly at his missteps, though not unkindly. Most had been dancing since they were young, and even those who hadn't bore the resilience of age with pride. Steve respected that. He admired the way they lived in their bodies, not despite the years, but because of them. Martha, of course, was merciless. "You move like you've got a broomstick where your spine should be," she muttered as she led him through a foxtrot. "Come on, Captain. Loosen those hips." "Pretend you're not on parade," he bit back a laugh. "Pretty sure this isn't what the government trained me for." "Then it's about time someone else did," she shot back. Over the next few weeks, Steve kept returning. The routine became oddly comforting. He'd show up early, stretch by the coat rack, chat with the others about local gossip and who brought the best lemon bars. They didn't care about his past or his title. To them, he was just Steve, the stiff one, the learner, the man with 2 left feet and a decent smile. And slowly, something began to shift. Martha took a particular interest in breaking him down, and not just on the dance floor. She'd prod him with questions, little verbal barbs that forced him to open up. "What did you do before this? Why did you leave the world behind? You ever fall in love, Steve?" He dodged most of them at first, but she had a way of worming under. Defenses. Like truth was a puzzle she'd been solving her whole life. In return, she told stories of her own, of smoky ballrooms and lost lovers, of protest marches and jazz clubs. She had danced through decades, always moving, always defiant. Then, one Tuesday afternoon, the mood changed. The center's director called a brief meeting before class. "I won't sugarcoat it," she said. "The city's pulling funding. Unless we raise about 50 grand by the end of the month, we'll have to close." A stunned silence followed. Then Martha, her voice sharp, barked, "Not happening!" Someone mumbled about bake sales. Another suggested a GoFundMe, but eyes kept drifting to Steve. "Don't look at me," he said, half laughing. "I'm just a student," Martha jabbed him with her cane. "You're Steve Rogers. You could sneeze on TV and raise money." "That's not who I am anymore." "No," she said, staring him down. "Then be who you are now. But don't just stand there." He sighed, long and low. "Fine, I'll help. But not as Captain America, just Steve." What followed was a whirlwind. Steve wasn't comfortable in the spotlight anymore, but he could still write a decent speech and smile, politely for the cameras. With help from a local reporter, word spread fast. Steve Rogers Dances to Save Senior Center was a headline no one could resist. He reached out to small businesses, veterans groups, even a few dance organizations. People donated, others volunteered. A retired jazz quartet offered to play. For free. Someone suggested a final fundraiser, a performance showcase with food, music, and a surprise dance number. Steve winced. "You're doing it," Martha declared. "With me. I can't. You can. You will. We're waltzing. Maybe a touch of swing if your knees can handle it." He groaned, but inside he felt something else. Anticipation. The night of the fundraiser, the community center gleamed. String lights lined the rafters. Banners made by the grandkids of the dance class students flapped gently against the walls. A jazz band warmed up in the corner. The room was packed. Locals, reporters, even a few curious tourists. The smell of fried chicken mingled with the scent of perfume and polished shoes. Steve paced backstage in a tailored navy blue suit. Martha adjusted her gown with the steady hands of a woman who had done this 1,000 times. "Why are you nervous?" she asked. "Because I'm going to embarrass myself in front of 300 people. She patted his arm. "Kid, I embarrassed myself in front of Frank Sinatra once. Lived to tell the tale." He laughed, breathless. Their music began, an old Ella Fitzgerald number, slow and rich. Martha stepped forward, offering her hand. "Just follow my lead." He did. It wasn't flawless. He missed a beat here, stumbled a turn there. But Martha was a force of nature, commanding yet light, her presence smoothing over every flaw. And Steve, well, he didn't fight the rhythm. He let it carry him. They danced, and somewhere between the sway and the spin, Steve smiled. Not the polite smile he'd worn during interviews, a real one, unfiltered, alive. The crowd clapped, then cheered. He caught glimpses of the other dancers, clapping, whistling, some even crying. Martha leaned in. "Told you," he bowed slightly, offering her his arm as they exited the floor. "Thank you." "For what?" "For reminding me what it's like to live." The fundraiser was a success. They raised nearly twice the amount needed. The community center stayed open, expanded even, with new classes and events. Steve kept dancing. He didn't stop being a symbol. He knew he never really could. But in that studio, he wasn't Captain America. He was just Steve, dancing on creaky floorboards with friends who'd seen more of life than he ever had. Friends like Martha. One day, a few months later, she didn't show up. He found out she'd passed in her sleep, peacefully, the way she'd always wanted. In her apartment, they discovered an old pair of ballroom shoes and a photo of her in her 20s, mid-spin, joy radiating from her face. She had left Steve a note. "Keep dancing. And when you finally fall in love, make sure they don't mind. Your terrible footwork." He chuckled through the tears. At the next class, he led the group through a slow waltz. No one said much, but everyone danced with a little more soul that day, because dancing, like life, wasn't about perfection. It was about showing up, moving forward, and finding joy in the spaces between the steps.